5 ways God will show you who to marry. What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, God is already showing you who you're supposed to marry, and you're missing the signs? What if the person you're meant to spend your life with has already crossed your path, but you dismissed them because they didn't match the picture in your head? Or worse, what if you're about to commit to the wrong person because you're confusing chemistry with confirmation? Here's the truth that nobody talks about. God doesn't play guessing games with something as significant as marriage. He doesn't leave you wandering in the dark, hoping you'll accidentally stumble into the right person. He has specific, clear, undeniable ways of revealing who He's chosen for you. But here's the problem. Most people are looking for the wrong signs. They're waiting for fireworks, butterflies, and love at first sight moments when God is speaking through completely different channels. They're listening to their emotions when God is speaking to their spirit. They're rushing into relationships when God is saying wait, or they're running from relationships when God is saying this is the one. Today, I'm going to share with you 5 specific biblical ways God shows you who to marry. These aren't vague feelings or romantic notions. These are concrete, testable, reliable signs that you can trust when making the most important decision of your life besides following Christ. And I need you to stay with me until the end, because the 5th sign, it's the one most people never experience because they settle too soon. It's the sign that confirms beyond any doubt that you found the right person. Miss this sign, and you might spend your entire marriage wondering if you made the right choice. But before we dive in, I need to know, are you currently in a relationship and wondering if this is the one? Or are you single and praying for God to reveal your future spouse? Drop a comment and let me know where you are, because understanding your season will help you receive what I'm about to share. Let me start by telling you about 2 couples I know. Both got married in the same year. Both had beautiful weddings. Both seemed perfect for each other, but their stories couldn't be more different. The first couple, I'll call them Alex and Christina, met at church, dated for 8 months, and got engaged because it felt right. Everyone said they looked good together. The chemistry was undeniable. They were both Christians, both had good jobs, both wanted kids. On paper, it made perfect sense. But 3 years into their marriage, Christina told me through tears, "I don't think I ever actually asked God if this was right. I just assumed because we met at church and he was a good guy, it must be God's will. Now I'm realizing we want completely different things. We can't communicate. We don't have the same vision for life, and I feel so alone in this marriage." The second couple, David and Rachel, had a completely different story. They were friends for 2 years before anything romantic happened. During that time, David told me he kept praying, "God, if this is the one, make it clear. Don't let me force it. Don't let me move ahead of you." When they finally started dating, David said something profound. "I didn't just fall in love with her. I received confirmation after confirmation that this was God's choice. My peace increased, my spiritual life strengthened, wise people affirmed it, doors opened, and most importantly, I knew, deep in my spirit, that this was right." 10 years later, their marriage is a testimony, not perfect, but purposeful, not without challenges, but built on a foundation that can't be shaken because it wasn't built on feelings, it was built on following God's clear direction. That's the difference between choosing someone because they seem good and receiving someone because God said this is the one. So here's my question for you. Do you want a marriage that survives or a marriage that thrives? Do you want to spend your life wondering what if, or do you want to walk in absolute confidence that you're with the person God designed for you? Comment thrives if you're committed to waiting for and recognizing God's choice, not just settling for what feels convenient. Now, before we get into the 5 ways God shows you who to marry, I need to address something important. These signs work together. You shouldn't make a decision based on one sign alone. God confirms His will through multiple channels. When all 5 of these signs align, you can move forward with confidence. But if even one is missing, you need to pause and seek God more.
Are you ready? Because what you're about to learn will save you from years of heartache or confirm that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. The first way God shows you who to marry is through peace, deep, unexplainable, unshakable peace that increases the closer you get to this person. Now, let me be clear about what I mean, because many people confuse excitement with peace, or they mistake the absence of conflict for the presence of God's confirmation. Peace is not the butterflies you feel when you see them. That's chemistry, and chemistry is important, but it's not confirmation. Peace is not the excitement of a new relationship. That's infatuation, and infatuation fades. The peace I'm talking about is a settled assurance in your spirit. It's a calm knowing that says, this is right, this is where I'm supposed to be, this is who I'm supposed to be with. And here's the key, this peace doesn't decrease over time, it increases. Let me tell you about Marcus and Jennifer. When Marcus first met Jennifer, he wasn't immediately attracted to her. There were no fireworks, no love at first sight moment. But as they became friends and eventually started dating, he noticed something unusual. He felt peaceful around her in a way he'd never felt with anyone else. He told me, with every other woman I dated, there was always this underlying anxiety. I was constantly worried about saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, or not being enough. But with Jennifer, I could just be myself, and the longer we were together, the more peaceful I felt. Even when we disagreed, even when things got hard, there was this foundation of peace that never left. That peace was God's confirmation. It was the Holy Spirit bearing witness with Marcus's spirit that this was the right choice. Now contrast that with Sarah's story. Sarah dated a man for 3 years. He was charming, successful, and everyone loved him. But Sarah never had peace. She told herself it was just fear of commitment, just her trust issues from past relationships, just her overthinking things. But the anxiety never went away. In fact, it got worse. Every time they talked about marriage, her stomach would knot up. Every time she prayed about their future, she felt nothing but confusion and unease. She ignored those feelings because everything looked right on the outside. They got engaged, and the night after he proposed, Sarah didn't sleep, not because of excitement, but because of overwhelming dread. That's when she finally admitted what she'd known all along. She didn't have peace about this marriage. She broke off the engagement 2 months before the wedding. It was devastating, embarrassing, and painful. But 2 years later, she told me, breaking that engagement was the best decision I ever made. I was so focused on making it work that I ignored God screaming at me through my lack of peace. So let me ask you right now, if you're in a relationship, do you have genuine peace about this person? Not just in the happy moments, but in the quiet moments when you're alone with God. When you think about spending your life with them, marrying them, raising children with them, growing old with them, do you feel peace or anxiety? Comment peace or anxiety and be honest with yourself, even if you don't want to admit it publicly. Here's how you test this. Peace from God is not dependent on circumstances. You can be going through a difficult season in the relationship. Maybe you're long distance. Maybe you're navigating a disagreement. Maybe you're facing external pressures and still have deep peace that this is the right person.
But anxiety that's from God, or more accurately, the absence of peace that's a warning from God, persists regardless of how good things seem on the surface. You could be in the honeymoon phase, everything could be going perfectly, and still have that nagging feeling that something isn't right. Philippians 4:7 talks about the peace of God, which transcends all understanding. This peace doesn't always make logical sense. Sometimes you have peace about someone who doesn't fit your list. Sometimes you lack peace about someone who does fit your list. That's because God's peace operates beyond your logic. It's spiritual discernment. Let me tell you what this peace looks like practically. You can pray freely about your relationship. You're not avoiding prayer because you're afraid of what God might say. You're not struggling to pray with this person because something feels off spiritually. You can be vulnerable without fear. You don't feel like you have to hide parts of yourself or perform to keep their interest. You can be fully known and still feel secure.
Your anxiety decreases, not increases. As the relationship progresses, you feel more settled, more certain, more grounded, not more confused, worried, or unsure. Wise people around you sense your peace. People who know you well comment on how calm, grounded, and joyful you seem in this relationship, not anxious, obsessive, or different from yourself. You sleep well. This might sound simple, but it's significant. If you're losing sleep over worry, doubt, or confusion about this relationship, that's not peace. God's choice for you doesn't rob you of rest. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but what if I'm just afraid of commitment? What if my anxiety is my issue, not a sign from God? Great question. Here's the difference. Fear of commitment is usually about vulnerability and risk. It shows up in all your relationships, friendships, family, romantic interests. But a lack of peace specific to one person, especially when you've had peace in other relationships, is different. That's targeted unease, and you need to pay attention to it. Also, fear of commitment usually decreases as you experience safety with the person. But if you're with someone and the longer you're together, the more uncertain you feel, that's not fear of commitment, that's your spirit trying to tell you something. Let me ask you another question. Have you ever stayed in a relationship despite lacking peace because you were afraid of being alone or starting over? Comment yes if you have, because recognizing that pattern is the first step to breaking it. Here's what I need you to understand. God will never lead you into something that consistently robs you of peace. He might lead you into challenges, into seasons that grow you, into situations that require faith, but His presence brings peace even in those hard places. If you're with someone and you consistently lack peace, that's God's mercy. He's protecting you from a mistake. Listen to that lack of peace before it becomes years of regret. But if you have that deep, settled, increasing peace, even when things aren't perfect, that's one of God's primary ways of showing you that you're with the right person. Now, peace alone isn't enough. You need the other 4 confirmations too. And the second sign is where many people get tripped up because it requires patience, observation, and wisdom. It's about watching what this person does when they think no one important is watching. But before we get there, tell me, do you believe God cares enough about your marriage to give you clear signs? Comment yes, or I hope so. The second way God shows you who to marry is through consistent character demonstrated over time. Not who they are on dates, not who they are at church, not who they are when they're trying to impress you, but who they are when the mask comes off. This is where so many people make devastating mistakes. They fall in love with potential instead of reality. They marry the person they hope their partner will become instead of the person they actually are. They ignore glaring character issues because the chemistry is strong or because they're tired of being alone. But here's what God does. He reveals people's true character over time. He creates situations that expose what's really in someone's heart. And if you're paying attention, if you're watching rather than just feeling, you'll see exactly who you're dealing with. Let me tell you about Emily and Jason. They met online, hit it off immediately, and within 3 months, Jason was talking about marriage. He was romantic, attentive, and said everything Emily had always wanted to hear. Her friends warned her to slow down, but Emily was convinced she'd finally found the one. Then Emily's father got sick, really sick. She had to spend weeks helping her family, caring for her dad, managing hospital visits. And suddenly, Jason's true character emerged. He complained about her lack of attention. He was frustrated that their relationship wasn't a priority. He couldn't handle not being the center of her world. Emily saw who he really was, someone who could be charming when things were easy, but selfish and immature when life got hard. She ended the relationship and later told me, God used my father's illness to show me who Jason really was before I made a lifetime commitment. That's what I mean by character revealed over time. God will create or allow circumstances that pull back the curtain on who someone really is. So what should you be looking for? What character traits indicate that God has brought you the right person? First, integrity in small things. Jesus said, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Watch how they handle money. Do they tip well? Do they pay their bills on time? Do they keep their word about small commitments? If they lie about small things, they'll lie about big things. Second, how they treat people who can't do anything for them. Watch how they treat waiters, janitors, customer service workers, homeless people. If they're rude or dismissive to people they consider beneath them, that reveals a heart issue. Eventually, when you're not new and exciting anymore, they'll treat you the same way. Third, how they handle conflict. Do they listen or do they just wait to talk? Can they apologize sincerely or do they justify everything? Can they try to understand your perspective or do they make everything about being right? Can they disagree with you respectfully or do they get nasty when they're upset? Fourth, how they respond to your boundaries. When you say no to something, do they respect it or pressure you? When you express a need or concern, do they dismiss it or take it seriously? Healthy people respect boundaries. Controlling or manipulative people resent them. Fifth, how they handle your success. Are they genuinely happy when good things happen to you, or is there subtle jealousy or competition? Do they celebrate your wins, or do they find ways to diminish them? The right person champions you, doesn't compete with you. Let me ask you, if you're in a relationship right now, have you seen this person in different contexts? With their family, under stress, when they're tired, when plans don't go their way, when they're sick? Comment yes or not yet. Because here's the truth, you need to see someone in multiple contexts over an extended period before you can truly know their character. This is why rushing into marriage is so dangerous. Time reveals what infatuation conceals. I know a couple, Kevin and Lisa, who dated for 4 years before getting engaged. People thought they were taking too long, that they were overthinking it. But Kevin told me I needed to see Lisa through different seasons. I needed to see how she handled loss, how she handled success, how she handled conflict with me and with others. And what I found was that her character was solid through all of it. She was the same person in private that she was in public. That consistency gave me confidence. That's wisdom. That's someone who understands that marriage is about character more than chemistry. Now, let me talk about red flags, character issues that should make you pause or walk away. Chronic lying, even about small things. If someone can't be truthful consistently, you can't build trust. Pattern of disrespect, to you, to others, to authority. Disrespect doesn't get better after marriage, it gets worse. Inability to take responsibility. If everything is always someone else's fault, if they never apologize sincerely, if they always play the victim, run. Controlling behavior. If they want to know where you are every moment, if they get upset when you spend time with friends or family, if they try to isolate you, that's not love, that's control. Substance abuse or addiction issues they're not actively addressing. Love doesn't fix addiction. Only God and intentional recovery work can. Chronic anger issues. If they punch walls, break things, or become verbally abusive when angry, believe that behavior. It will be directed at you eventually. Chronic irresponsibility. If they can't hold a job, can't manage money, can't follow through on commitments, marriage won't change that. Now, here's what's hard. Sometimes you see these red flags and you make excuses. They had a rough childhood. They're working on it. Everyone has flaws. Love is supposed to be unconditional. Yes, everyone has flaws. Yes, love is patient. But there's a difference between someone with flaws who's actively growing and someone with character issues they're ignoring or justifying. Let me tell you about Rachel. She dated a man who had an anger problem. He'd never hit her, but he'd punch walls, throw things, and yell. And Rachel kept making excuses. He's under a lot of stress. He's really working on it. He's not like this all the time. Her pastor pulled her aside and said something that changed her perspective. Rachel, you're looking at who you hope he'll become, but God is showing you who he is right now. And right now, he has an uncontrolled anger problem. Until that's healed, truly healed, with fruit and evidence, he's not ready for marriage, and you staying is enabling him to avoid facing it. Rachel ended the relationship.
Now, peace and character are crucial, but they're not enough on their own. The third way God shows you who to marry involves the people He's already placed in your life. And this sign is the one most people ignore because they don't want to hear what others are saying. But before we get there, answer me this. Have you ever ignored warnings from people who loved you because you were convinced you knew better? Comment yes or no. Sign number 3, confirmation from your spiritual community. The third way God shows you who to marry is through confirmation from your spiritual community, the godly people who know you, love you, and have no agenda except your well-being. Now, I need to be careful here because I'm not saying you need everyone's approval. I'm not saying you let your parents choose your spouse or that you need unanimous consent from every person you know. That's not biblical and it's not realistic. But here's what is biblical. Proverbs 15:22 says, "Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed." Proverbs 11:14 says, "Where there is no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors there is safety." God speaks through community. And when multiple, mature, godly people who know you well and have your best interests at heart are all expressing similar concerns or affirmations about your relationship, you need to listen. Let me tell you about Daniel and Grace. Daniel was crazy about Grace. He thought she was everything he'd ever wanted. But 3 people he deeply respected, his pastor, his mentor, and his sister, all separately expressed concerns. They noticed that Daniel seemed less joyful, less spiritually vibrant, more anxious since he'd been dating Grace. They noticed that Grace was subtly controlling, that she didn't really respect Daniel's calling, that she seemed more interested in what Daniel could provide than who Daniel was. Daniel's first reaction was defensive. He thought they were being judgmental, that they didn't really know Grace, that they were wrong. But because he trusted these people, he agreed to pause and pray. He asked God, "If they're seeing something I'm missing, show me." Within a month, Daniel saw it. Grace's true colors came out in a conflict, and suddenly Daniel recognized all the patterns his loved ones had tried to warn him about. He ended the relationship and later told me, "My pride almost cost me. I'm so grateful I listened." That's what godly community does. It sees what love blinds you to. Now, here's what you need to understand about seeking counsel. Choose your counselors wisely. Don't ask your single friend who's never had a healthy relationship. Don't ask your divorced coworker who's bitter about marriage. Don't ask people who will just tell you what you want to hear. Seek out people who are in strong marriages, who have spiritual maturity, who've demonstrated wisdom in their own lives. Ask specific questions. Don't just say, "What do you think?" Ask, "What do you observe about how I am when I'm with this person? Do you see any red flags I might be missing? Does this person seem to bring the best in me? Do you have peace about this relationship?" Listen to patterns, not individual opinions. One person might have a bad feeling that's just their issue, but if 3, 4, 5 mature people all express similar concerns, that's a pattern. Pay attention. Don't dismiss concerns just because you don't like them. If someone brings up something uncomfortable, your first instinct might be to defend and dismiss, but sit with it, pray about it, consider whether there's truth there that you've been avoiding. Let me tell you about Monica's story, but from the other side. Monica was my friend, and I watched her date a man who worried me. He was charming in public, but subtly mean to her when he thought no one was listening. He made little comments that diminished her. He was financially irresponsible, but blamed others. He claimed to be a Christian, but rarely demonstrated fruit. I prayed about whether to say something. I didn't want to overstep, but finally I felt God prompting me to speak. I took Monica to lunch and said, "I love you enough to risk this friendship. I'm watching someone slowly diminish your light, and I can't stay silent. I see patterns that concern me, and I need you to at least consider whether I'm seeing something you're missing." Monica was hurt, angry. She told me I was judging, that I didn't understand, that I was wrong.
We didn't speak for 3 months, but then she called me crying. She'd discovered he'd been lying about major things, his job status, his finances, even other relationships. Everything came crashing down, and she said, "You tried to tell me. I'm so sorry I didn't listen." That's the risk godly friends take, speaking truth that might cost the relationship because they love you more than they need you to like them. So let me ask you, who in your life has earned the right to speak into your relationship decisions? Who has demonstrated wisdom, maturity, and genuine love for you? Have you asked those people for their honest perspective? Comment, "I have people," or "I need to find people," because having spiritual community is essential, not optional. Now, let me address the flip side. What if everyone loves this person? What if your community is affirming the relationship? That's a powerful confirmation. When the people who know you best, who've seen your past relationships, who understand your struggles and strengths, when those people say, "This is different, this is right, we see how good you are together," that carries weight. I watched this with my friends Michael and Rebecca. Rebecca had been in several unhealthy relationships before Michael. Her friends and family were frankly worried about her pattern of choosing the wrong guys. But when Michael came into the picture, everyone noticed the difference. Her mom told me, "I've never seen Rebecca this peaceful, this grounded, this much herself." Her best friend said, "Michael brings out the best in her. She's more confident, more joyful, more spiritually alive." Her pastor said, "I can see God all over this relationship." That unanimous affirmation gave Michael and Rebecca added confidence. They weren't just relying on their feelings, they had confirmation from mature people who cared about them. That's what godly community provides, perspective you can't have when you're emotionally involved. But here's something crucial. You need to have built this community before you're in a serious relationship. If you wait until you're engaged to suddenly start asking people what they think, you've waited too long. You need people who've been walking with you, who know your patterns, who've earned your trust over time. And you need to give them permission to speak truth, even hard truth. You need to say, "I trust you. If you see something concerning, I want you to tell me. I might not like it, but I need you to be honest." Let me ask you, have you given the people closest to you permission to speak honestly about your relationships? Or have you created an environment where they know you'll get defensive if they express concerns? Comment, "They can speak freely," or "I need to change that." Here's what I've learned. God rarely gives you direction that contradicts what He's showing the mature believers around you. He might give you specific details they don't know. He might confirm timing they're not aware of, but the fundamental question of whether this is the right person, that usually has alignment between what God shows you personally and what He reveals through your community. When there's major disconnect, when you're convinced it's right, but everyone who loves you is concerned, or when they're all supportive but you have no peace, something's off. Either you're not hearing God clearly, or they're not seeing the full picture. Either way, slow down, seek more clarity, don't rush forward when there's significant misalignment. Now, peace, character, and community confirmation are powerful, but the fourth sign is where many people get tripped up, especially in our culture that glorifies romantic love above all else. This fourth sign has to do with something much more practical than feelings. It has to do with vision, purpose, and whether your lives are actually going in the same direction. But before we get there, let me ask you, do you think it's possible to love someone deeply but still be wrong for each other? Comment your thoughts. Sign number 4, aligned vision and purpose. The fourth way God shows you who to marry is through aligned vision and purpose. Not just "we both want kids someday" alignment, but deep spiritual alignment about life calling, kingdom purpose, values, and where you're headed. This is the sign that gets overlooked the most, especially when emotions are strong. People think, "We love each other, so we'll figure everything else out." But love without alignment leads to years of frustration, resentment, and pulling in different directions. Let me tell you about James and Ashley. They met in college, fell deeply in love, and got married right after graduation. They were both Christians, both from good families, both committed to the relationship, but they never actually talked about the deep stuff. 3 years into marriage, the cracks appeared. James was called to ministry. He wanted to go to seminary, possibly become a missionary. Ashley wanted a stable life in their hometown, close to family, with a predictable career path. Neither was wrong, but they wanted fundamentally different lives. They spent the next 5 years in conflict. Every major decision became a battle. Move or stay, save or spend, risk or play it safe. Neither felt supported, both felt misunderstood. Their love was real, but their visions were incompatible. When James told me their story, he said something heartbreaking. We should have had these conversations before we got married. We should have made sure we were heading in the same direction. We thought love was enough. It's not. That's the painful truth. Love is not enough if you're going different directions. So what does aligned vision look like? What should you be discussing and discovering? First, calling and career. Not just what job they have now, but what they feel called.
Comment yes or we need to, because if you haven't, that needs to happen before any talk of marriage. Now here's what I want you to understand. Aligned vision doesn't mean you're identical. You'll have different personalities, different strengths, different interests. That's healthy and good. But alignment means you're rowing in the same direction. You're building toward the same future. Your core values match. Your life callings complement rather than contradict. Your vision for marriage, family, money, ministry, and purpose are compatible. Let me tell you about Thomas and Maria. Thomas felt called to inner city ministry. Maria felt called to education. Different callings, right? But when they talked deeply, they realized their visions aligned perfectly. Maria wanted to teach in under-resourced schools. Thomas wanted to start programs for at-risk youth. Their callings were different, but complementary. They could build a life together where both were fulfilled, and neither had to sacrifice their God-given purpose. That's aligned vision, not sameness, but synergy. Here's what God does. He brings people together whose callings and purposes fit, whose strengths complement each other's weaknesses, whose visions for life can merge into a shared journey that honors Him and fulfills both people. But here's what God doesn't do. He doesn't bring together people whose fundamental visions are incompatible and expect one to sacrifice who they are to make the relationship work. I need to say this clearly. If pursuing your God-given calling means abandoning this relationship, or if being in this relationship means abandoning your God-given calling, something is wrong. The right person won't require you to betray who God created you to be. Amos 3:3 asks, "Do two walk together unless they have agreed to do so?" The answer is no. You can't build a life with someone who's walking a different path. So how do you discover if you have aligned vision? You have the conversations. You ask the hard questions. You talk about dreams, fears, non-negotiables. You discuss scenarios, like if God called us overseas, how would you feel? If we struggled financially, how would we handle it? If one of us wanted to make a major career change, what would that process look like? And you watch how they respond. Are they open, defensive, willing to discuss? Do their answers align with your values? Can you imagine building the life they're describing? Let me ask you, what's one non-negotiable value or calling in your life that your future spouse must either share or fully support? Comment below. Because here's the truth, some things aren't negotiable. If God has called you to something, you can't compromise that for a relationship, and the right person won't ask you to. Now you might be thinking, what if we're mostly aligned but have some differences? That's normal. No two people align perfectly on everything, but the core things, faith, family, calling, values, those need alignment. The peripheral things can have flexibility. You both love God? Check. You both want kids? Check.
You both value generosity. Check. But one loves city life and one loves the country? That's negotiable. One loves spontaneity and one loves structure? That's personality differences you can work with. The key is distinguishing between core issues and preferential differences. All right, we've covered peace, character community confirmation, and aligned vision. But there's one more sign, the fifth and final way God shows you who to marry. It's the sign that seals everything else. It's the sign that moves you from, I think this is right, to, I know this is right. It's the rarest sign because most people settle before they experience it. But before I reveal it, I need to know, are you willing to continue